In the summer of 1982, Arsenal bought a striker called Chapman for £500,000. I wonder whatever happened to him. Hello and welcome back to my channel over and over and over again, which features everything to do with Arsenal. This video today is going to be looking back at a former Arsenal player who maybe will never be considered to be a great player for the club. Very brief Arsenal career, but one that I felt was worth looking back on. And that player is Chapman. Now, back in the summer of 1982, Arsenal were desperate for some goal scorers. We'd really struggled since the sale of Frank Stapleton to Manchester United the previous year. So that summer, Terry Neal was really looking to add some firepower to his squad. Arriving from Cologne was Tony Woodcock, very experienced England international who had previously won the Division 1 title in a European Cup at Nottingham Forest, of course, back in the late 70s. And also he managed to sign Chapman, who at that time was at Stoke City. Now, Chapman was considered to be quite a good prospect at that particular time. 22 years old, a big sort of 6'4" centre forward who was playing for Stoke City, and over the previous two seasons he'd actually scored 34 goals. So he was well thought of, and there were a number of clubs interested in him. Now, Arsenal had originally offered Stoke City £100,000 for the player, but Stoke didn't feel that that valuation matched what they felt he was worth. Now, in those days, if the clubs couldn't agree on a transfer fee, then it went to what was called a transfer tribunal, and they decided how much the club would have to pay. In this particular case, the tribunal ruled that Arsenal would have to pay £500,000 for Chapman, which was obviously a lot higher than Arsenal's original valuation. And I do feel as though maybe that price tag didn't help Chapman's career at Arsenal, because when you bear in mind that Tony Woodcock had also cost the same amount of money, £500,000, and with Woodcock we were getting an experienced player, very good technical player, whereas Chapman was quite raw and inexperienced. And I do feel as though maybe I say that price tag didn't help him to feel maybe get the fans on his side perhaps. Now the season started and Arsenal didn't start particularly well, and unfortunately Chapman didn't seem to fit in at all. He looked very clumsy. His first touch was poor, and he wasn't really scoring many goals either. Now, 2 months into the season, we'd got knocked out of the UEFA Cup. We'd got hammered 5-2 at Highbury by Spartak Moscow, which was a fantastic performance by the Russians. But after that game, Chapman got dropped in place of Alan Sunderland. Now, at that particular time, Chapman was actually top scorer with 3 goals, but I think it was quite clear that he wasn't going to be the answer to our problems. And from that point, actually, Sunderland, who of course had been at the club since the late 70s, actually started to develop a really good partnership with Woodcock. Now, it wasn't a particularly good season for Arsenal, finished 10th in the league. Again, wasn't really scoring enough goals, although Tony Woodcock did score over 20, had a good season. But Arsenal did reach the semi-final of both cup competitions that year. Now, in the FA Cup semi-final, up at Villa Park against Manchester United, Arsenal were in actual fact 1-0 up at half time and looking at a good bet to go on to the final at Wembley, where in fact we would have faced Brighton and had a great chance to win the cup. Unfortunately, Stuart Robson, who had a great game in the first half and had played a big part in the goal that Woodcock had scored, unfortunately he'd got injured. And our substitute that day was Chapman, who came on at half time. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it was his fault that we ended up losing the game 2-1, but that kind of summed up the season that he'd had at Arsenal. Now, he did stay at Arsenal until December 1983, but he didn't really play very often at all, and in the end he only scored 5 goals for the club. He moved to Sunderland, and again, he didn't really seem to settle there either. He just scored 5 goals in 28 games for Sunderland as well, and it seemed as though maybe this exciting career that he looked as though he was going to have was never going to really take off. But it finally did when he linked up with Howard Wilkinson in the summer of 1984. Now, Howard Wilkinson was then manager of Sheffield Wednesday, and it was maybe his more direct style that really seemed to bring the best out of Chapman. And in 4 seasons at Sheffield Wednesday, he scored 79 goals in 186 appearances and was really highly thought of at that time. A really effective striker he became. Now, he ended up leaving Sheffield Wednesday in 1988, and he did briefly sign for Brian Clough at Nottingham Forest, where in 1989 he actually won a League Cup winners' medal, playing in the final that season as well. Um, but unfortunately, he didn't stay at Nottingham Forest for very long when he managed to link up again with Howard Wilkinson, this time at Leeds United in 1989. And it was at Leeds United where he enjoyed his greatest successes, actually, where in 1992 he won the league title, the final, of course, season before the Premier League started, when Leeds pipped Manchester United to the title. Lee Chapman actually scored 20 goals that season. And in the end, in 172 games for Leeds, he scored 80 goals. So, you know, after his initial problems with Arsenal and subsequently with Sunderland, he did go on to have a very successful career in English football. He finally retired from playing in 1997, and his actually career statistics were reasonably impressive as well. He made 692 club appearances and scored 256 goals. So that's sort of one goal every 3 or 4 games, isn't it? Which, you know, is a decent total for such a long career. I say personally for me, and I think for many Arsenal fans from the early 1980s, probably look at Lee Chapman as being one of the worst signings that the club ever made. I feel that's maybe a little bit harsh, but you know, he certainly didn't cover himself in any glory at Arsenal, and in fact, he did look extremely poor. Looking back on it now, I think maybe it was a style of play. You know, where I say when he went to a more direct teams later on in the 80s, I say under Howard Wilkinson, he did really thrive. So maybe it was Arsenal's style of play as well. And obviously trying to link up with a player like Tony Woodcock, a very technical player. And you could see later on when we bought Charlie Nicholas, another technical player, and they seemed to kind of work quite well together. So I do feel maybe Arsenal's style of play didn't suit him. I'm sure now looking back, he probably regrets that move because it just didn't. It sort of stalled his career really for a couple of years. Of course, you know, in later times, of course, Lee Chapman married the actress Leslie Ash, and I know they had a few issues as well, which were quite highly publicised. But I don't think we need to dwell too much on that. I just really wanted to briefly look at his rather short Arsenal career. The reason why was that because it was actually on this day in 1982 that the tribunal set that fee at £500,000, which obviously looking back did seem very, very expensive for a 22-year-old with little experience. And of course, it proved to be a lot more than he was perhaps worth to Arsenal in the short time he was there. So that's a little look back on the rather brief Arsenal career of Lee Chapman, and of course where he went sort of afterwards as well. So that's that for today. Coming up soon, obviously, we're going to be looking at some more transfers as well. I was expecting actually to have a few announcements to make by this point this week, but unfortunately, things haven't quite happened yet. But as far as I'm aware, there's a few in the pipeline, so we'll maybe look at that and announce them as soon as we can. And also, as well, I'll be looking at some more former Arsenal players. You know, some had a lot more successful careers at Arsenal than poor Lee Chapman did, and others that maybe fared a similar fate as well. So trying to mix it up a little bit, give you some different content as well through the summer while we're waiting for the new season to start. So if you like what you're seeing here on this channel, it's a new channel. I am trying to grow it, so please like, share, and subscribe. And watch out for the next video, which will be coming very soon. I say hopefully, fingers crossed, there'll be some good, exciting transfer news to come. But in the meantime, as always, come on, you.